this theme, I wanted to do a multiplayer game, seeing as I had 3 weeks, but my original plan was to do a multiplayer game if it only fit with the theme without forcing it. But since the theme was teamwork, it fit perfectly. For the genre of the game, I decided to do a stealth game where the players distract the guards to help each other get through to the end goal. It allowed me to learn how to make a multiplayer game in Unity and introduce myself to making enemy AI and pathfinding. I began by using Photon Pan Classic by following a tutorial series on YouTube by Diving Squid. It worked really well to begin with, but when I tried to sync the animations across the network, it wouldn't work. So I spent some time researching and asking people, and eventually after talking to the people on the Photon Network Discord, I decided on restarting the game entirely by using Photon Pan 2 rather than Classic, as it was a more in-depth and hands-on version. I followed the official tutorial made by Photon, but had a lot of issues in creating rooms and loading levels for players. I eventually had to change it all for another tutorial series by Rugbug Redfern, which eventually made it work. For the character movement, I used the character controller for the first time rather than a rigid body, which I think I prefer, as the character controller .move function is a lot easier to understand. I also made it a third-person camera view for the first time after following a Brackeys tutorial. I used the packaged cinema machine and used a free-look camera. This made it a lot easier as all the programming is done for you. You just tell it what to look at, what to follow, and all the inputs and sensitivities done for you. You can also add an extra thing so it moves the camera out of collisions so it doesn't clip through the walls. I then added a jump and crouch feature for the character and added animations from Mixamo, which I found a really useful website as you can upload the character model you're using, search for the animation you want, and it'll give you all the ones that will work for the rig that you have. Once I had all the animations working and the movement working and syncing across the network, I looked at making the guard AI. I looked at another tutorial series by Sebastian Legge, where you use core routines to move a guard to specific points in a path. Once it hits a point, it stops, rotates to its next point, and then continues moving, and then walks around in a loop constantly. I also added a spotlight to the front of the guard to represent its view, and then looked to see if the player was in the area and if it wasn't being blocked by anything by using a line cast. If the player was in view, it changed the colour of the spotlight from yellow to red. With the base of the guard AI working, I decided on making an actual level rather than the test hub that I was using. I decided to learn how to use ProGrids and ProBuilder in Unity, which went really well as they work in a similar way to Unreal's BSPs, but you don't need to convert them to static meshes, and you can also still code in C#. Before I began creating the level, I did some research into what makes a good stealth level. The main video that really stood out to me and was really useful was Common Stealth Level Design Mistakes by Ben Bauer, who is one of the level design directors on Splinter Cell. I then made a preliminary sketch to get an idea for the level and then built it in Unity. I decided to go for an outpost kind of thing where the player can infiltrate a guarded perimeter. It also allowed me to add a guard tower so the player can climb so they can get a vantage point for the second half of the area. I also made it the players spawn in an area along the cliff so they also start at a vantage point. With the level built, I decided to make a rock throwing feature which could distract the guards. I made it so it was instantiated by the player and then gets launched with a rigidbody.addForce function. I made it so it would go in the direction that the camera was facing, and if I had enough time I would have made it so the player could see the trajectory before throwing, allowing them to increase or decrease the force so they can specifically put it in places. Once I had the rock throw done, I needed to make so the guard would go towards where it landed. I did this by making so the rock had a sound radius, so all guards within that radius would be alerted when it landed. To make the guard walk towards the rock, originally I had the idea of giving it various transforms in a radius around the rock as chill run, so check which was closest and move the guard towards it in a straight line, so all the guards wouldn't be trying to stand on the same spot. However, it occurred to me it wouldn't necessarily work as there could be things in the way, so I had to learn how to do pathfinding, which turned out really simple as I looked at the Brackeys NavMesh tutorial, which is the pathfinding tool built into Unity. All you need to do is designate what is walkable floor and give the moving character a NavMesh agent component. With that, all you need to do is tell it a location and it will calculate the path and walk towards it. I also didn't need to use trial transforms as I can specify a stopping distance, which is how far away from the location it can go before it stops moving, which fit the purpose of preventing all the guards from going to the same spot. Once I had that working, I needed to make the guards search for the player. Since the stealth game AI are usually made with finite state machines, I tried to emulate a basic one. So the guard had a patrolling state and a searching state. When patrolling, they will go along the predefined path, and when searching, they will go towards the source of the noise, rotate 180 degrees clockwise, anti-clockwise, wait a couple seconds, and then do a 360-degree spin before walking back to the current waypoint. Once they are at the waypoint, they will go back to the patrolling state. With the guard able to be distracted, I finished the tutorial series by Sebastian Lake and made it so the player doesn't get caught immediately, but if they stay in the guard's view for too long, then they get caught. This is shown by the colour of the guard's light turning red over time rather than instantly. Once caught, the player can't move and his caught UI is shown, where they can either restart the level or leave. If the players make it to the end, then the win UI shows up, congratulating them, allowing them to go back to the menu. However, it only shows if all players reach the end, so no man is left behind. The biggest issue I had was getting everything to work over a network. To begin with, the movement and animations were synced eventually, but once I finished the prototype, I could only get it to work from a single player perspective. While multiple players can play in the same level, there is a lot of problems such as the syncing no longer being smooth but really laggy. The guard's patrol was synced up, but when a guard gets distracted, it's only on the player who threw the rock's point of view. It doesn't sync up. This is a problem as it means the players can't directly help each other by distracting other guards. However, they could still go to vantage points and describe where the guards are to other players. So there is still some teamwork aspect to it. It only got worse as the end UI, which is the win and losing screen, would only show up for the player who got caught or actually reaches the end, which means if one player got caught, they wouldn't be able to move, whereas the other player would and could still do the level. This does kind of work, but wasn't the intended plan. So I realized when editing that when I built the game and sent it to my friend for recording the multiplayer, the lag issues fixed itself, which means it might have actually been possible to finish the prototype, but I would have still had to research how to access a player's script on the other network rather than on the local network. If I had more time, I could have worked out all of the bugs and issues, but since I spent around 2.5 weeks working solely on this project, I had to stop and work on my other assignments because I hadn't done anything for them yet. From this prototype, I learned a lot of new things about Unity, such as networking, AI, pathfinding, using character controllers, and how to build levels with ProGrids and ProBuilder. One thing I realised was how difficult networking multiplayers actually are, but they aren't impossible. It just takes a lot more time and research to be able to understand how to get things to sync and work well together over a network. I would enjoy continuing to research and learning how to make them in the future, but primarily I think I want to focus on single player games for now and getting a better understanding of things like the pathfinding and AI before making it work across the network. I did really enjoy the AI side of things and would like to really expand on that and the pathfinding and maybe use it in a future prototype such as a click to move game, like how movement is done in RuneScape, where you click with a mouse and then the player calculates a path and walks for you. I created all of the materials myself for this project, but I did use the base ProGrid material to get the grid lines and then just altered the colour. I also used a basic dummy and bodyguards that I found on the Unity asset store, and all my animations was found through Mixamo, all of which will be referenced in the blog post other than specific animations as they don't have a creator but can be found through Mixamo.